Deep within the shadowed corridors of a hidden fortress, the low hum of ancient, forbidden machinery vibrates through the floorboards. It's a sound that has echoed across centuries, a rhythmic pulse that mimics a heartbeat but lacks any trace of soul. Most men fear the end of their lives, viewing death as an iron curtain that brings an inevitable close to their ambitions. But for Arnim Zola, death was never an ending. It was simply a design flaw, a biological inefficiency that could be solved with enough genius, enough cruelty, and a complete disregard for the laws of nature. He is the man who turned his own body into a discarded shell, a scientist who traded his flesh for steel and his mortality for a digital ghost. While the world remembers the titans of World War II like Captain America and the Red Skull, it is Arnim Zola who stands as the architect of the nightmare that refused to die. He is the master of the Bio-Fanatic, the weaver of genetic abominations, and the keeper of secrets so dark they were buried by a race of gods. From the frozen peaks of the Swiss Alps to the desolate wastes of Dimension Z, Zola's influence spans the globe and stretches across realities. But how does a frail, dwarfish man from the early 1900s become a towering, faceless monster with a television screen for a chest? How does one individual decode the secrets of the deviants, the ancient rivals of the Eternals, and use that godlike technology to serve the most evil regime in human history? This is not just a story of a mad scientist. It is the chronicle of a man who unraveled the genetic code of the universe and used it to build a legacy of horror. This is the complete, terrifying history of Arnim Zola, the Bio-Fanatic. The story begins in the year 1908. Arnim Zola was born into a world on the brink of industrial revolution, but he was a child of the past. Growing up in an ancestral Swiss castle, Zola was physically frail, a dwarfish figure who seemed destined for a life of quiet observation. However, what his body lacked in stature, his mind made up for in a cold, calculating brilliance. He wasn't interested in the toys of other children. He was interested in the building blocks of life itself. His obsession with genetics and biochemistry led him to study under W. Ladislav Shinsky, the man who would one day found the Enclave. Even then, Zola was an outlier, pushing the boundaries of what was considered ethical or even possible. The turning point of his life occurred within the damp, stone-walled archives of his family's estate. While scouring ancient documents, Zola made a discovery that would change the course of human history. He found a cache of records detailing the scientific secrets of the deviants, a prehistoric offshoot of humanity created by the Celestials. These weren't just theories, they were blueprints for the manipulation of the very essence of life. Zola, with a patience that bordered on the supernatural, spent years decoding these texts. By the 1930s, he had achieved what no modern scientist could claim. He created his first artificial life form, a tiny, writhing, tentacled creature that pulsed with a life Zola had manufactured from nothing. This was the birth of the Bio-Fanatic, but a scientist needs resources and a visionary needs a stage. As the shadow of the swastika began to loom over Europe, Zola looked at his neutral homeland of Switzerland and saw only limitations. Nazi Germany, however, offered a playground. They didn't care about ethics, they cared about power. Seeking financial support and the raw materials for his increasingly ambitious experiments, Zola crossed the border and entered the service of Adolf Hitler. In the laboratories of the Third Reich, Zola became a ghost in the machine of the Nazi war effort. While history books focus on the tanks and the planes, the secret files of the Marvel Universe whisper of Zola's more grotesque contributions. It is whispered that he had a hand in the creation of Nazi superoperatives that defied explanation. There was sculpture, the animated statue that moved with a cold, stony malice. There was the Shark Man, an amphibious horror designed to haunt the Atlantic. And then there was Corpse, a creature born of a brain transplant that defied the grave. While Zola's direct involvement in every one of these horrors is debated, his genius was the soil in which they grew. His work soon caught the eye of entities far beyond the reach of mortal men. Feeder, an inhuman exile, and his half-deviant son Maelstrom recognized a kindred spirit in Zola. They shared with him even deeper secrets of genetic manipulation, accelerating his progress toward a goal that was once thought impossible: the preservation of consciousness beyond the death of the biological form. By early 1945, the Thousand-Year Reich was crumbling. The Allied forces were closing in, and the leaders of the Nazi Party were looking for a way out. Zola presented them with a miracle. He had perfected a brain pattern imprinting device, a machine capable of taking a person's entire personality, memories, and soul, and transferring them into the brain of a cloned body. Zola didn't just offer this to his superiors, he used it on himself first. The frail, dwarfish man was gone. In his place stood a robotic titan. Zola had transferred his consciousness into a new, taller body. To ensure his survival, he placed his brain not in the vulnerable head, but deep within the reinforced chest cavity. For eyes and ears, he utilized an ESP box, an electronic sensor array that converted telepathic input into sensory data. To provide a semblance of his former self, an electronic chest harness projected a three-dimensional image of his original face onto his torso. Arnim Zola had become a literal living computer, a geneticist housed in a fortress of steel. With his own immortality secured, Zola turned his attention to his patrons. He prepared the technology for Hitler to transfer his consciousness after death. He equipped Johann Schmidt, the Red Skull, with a specialized serum designed to guarantee survival in suspended animation, a failsafe that would allow the skull to plague the world for decades to come. Zola even struck a deal with Baron Wolfgang von Strucker, the founder of Hydra, ensuring that his genius would have a home in the subversion of the post-war world. On April 30, 1945, as the Red Army moved through Berlin, the physical body of Adolf Hitler died during a confrontation with the original Human Torch, Jim Hammond, and his partner Toro. But Zola's machines were already humming. Hitler's consciousness was snatched from the brink of the void and transferred into a disembodied brain, waiting for a cloned vessel. Zola, ever the pragmatist, kept Hitler's original brain preserved in a vat, a backup for a backup. Even when a low-ranking German officer managed to slay an independent Hitler clone shortly after, the true essence of the dictator remained safe in Zola's care. In the decades that followed the war, Zola became a shadow. He worked within the expanding web of Hydra, but he was always a sovereign of his own domain. He maintained contact with the consciousness of Hitler, moving the dictator's mind from one cloned body to another as the years rolled by. In 1955, one of these clones, acting as a vestige of the old regime, was hunted down and killed by an American adventurer named Ward Stalker, but Zola merely adjusted his calculations and continued his work. Even the legendary mutant James Howlett, the man who would become Wolverine, crossed paths with Zola's operations during this era. Though they never met face-to-face, Logan's interference in Zola's secret labs began a long-running, silent feud between the feral warrior and the cold scientist. Zola's brilliance is undisputed in the annals of Marvel history. He stands in the same dark pantheon as the High Evolutionary, the Jackal, and Mr. Sinister. But while those men often sought to evolve or perfect humanity, Zola's goals were always more utilitarian and more monstrous. He didn't want to create a better human. He wanted to create a more obedient slave. His creations ranged from the mundane to the nightmarish. He built animated furniture, living, breathing chairs and tables made of flesh and bone that served his every whim in his Swiss castle. But he also built fully sentient, superpowered humanoids, each one a testament to his mastery over the double helix. One of his most terrifying advantages is his telepathic link to his creations. Because every life form he creates originates from cloned cells of his own brain, Zola maintains a psychic tether to them. He doesn't just give orders. He can force their obedience or, if he chooses, take direct possession of their bodies. He can see through their eyes and feel through their skin. When hooked into his advanced laboratory equipment, Zola's consciousness can expand, projecting his senses across the globe, making him an omnipresent threat that can strike from any of his many offspring. As the modern age of heroes dawned, Zola found himself constantly at odds with the Sentinel of Liberty, Captain America. Steve Rogers represented everything Zola loathed, an idealized human form achieved through pure science and indomitable will. To Zola, Captain America was the ultimate prize, the perfect genetic template. This rivalry would define much of Zola's modern career, as he constantly sought to subvert the American dream through biological warfare. But Cap wasn't the only hero to face the Bio-Fanatic's wrath. The Avengers and the Fantastic Four frequently found themselves dismantling Zola's laboratories. Even the mercenary Deadpool, Wade Wilson, found himself elbow-deep in Zola's Corpse Corps, a personal army of proto-husks that Zola had animated using the DNA of deceased heroes. While Deadpool found the slaughter amusing, the reality of Zola's work was far more grim. He was a man who saw the dead not as something to be respected, but as raw material to be recycled. Zola's list of children is a gallery of horrors. There is Doughboy, a massive, putty-like creature capable of absorbing almost any impact and reshaping its form at Zola's command. There is Primus, a humanoid shape-changer who possessed a degree of sentience that would eventually lead to his own rebellion. And then there were the hate-mongers. Using his mind transference tech, Zola kept the spark of Hitler alive, first in the form of the hate-monger and later within a genetic android known as Nazi X. Zola even performed the ultimate sacrilege on his own rival, transferring the Red Skull's consciousness into a cloned body of Captain America himself, forcing the ultimate symbol of evil to inhabit the ultimate symbol of good. The reach of Zola's experiments was global. In the small nation of Rio de Muerte, he unleashed the man-fish, a creature that terrorized the local population and served as a test case for Zola's aquatic warfare theories. He created the Deltite, an advanced android based on the brain patterns of Baron Strucker, and successfully infiltrated it into SHIELD as a sleeper agent. For a time, Zola was the invisible hand behind the world's most dangerous conspiracies. One of the most revealing looks into Zola's psyche came when Captain America and his ally Donna Maria Puentes were captured and brought to his renovated Swiss castle. The interior was a fevered dream of biological engineering, rooms that breathed, chairs that recoiled when touched. Zola, ever the narcissist, couldn't help but gloat. He detailed his origins, his triumphs, and his plan to finally place Hitler's brain into the body of Captain America. He was so lost in his own oratory that he failed to notice Donna Maria's desperation. She hurled a vial of volatile chemicals at the scientist, sparking a conflagration that leveled the castle. Zola escaped, of course. A man who can jump bodies like a radio signal is hard to kill. He retreated into the shadows, allying himself with Helmut Zemo to create more monsters, including the tragic figure known as Vermin. He later reunited with the Red Skull and the hate-monger on the Isle of Exiles, where they attempted to use a biocomputer powered by enslaved captives to reconstruct the cosmic cube. The plan failed spectacularly when the hate-monger's consciousness was trapped within a powerless, flawed cube, but Zola simply moved on to the next project. His ambition knew no bounds. He attempted to hijack the scientific legacy of Bruce Banner, sending a genetic duplicate of the Hulk to invade the Northwind Observatory. When the Avengers intervened, they discovered a disturbing truth. The Hulk duplicate's very clothing was a separate genetic creation that Zola used as a conduit for his consciousness. He abducted Reed Richards and Hank Pym, the two smartest men on the planet, seeking to add their intellects to his own. It was only through the intervention of Monica Rambeau that his equipment was sabotaged, leaving him at the mercy of his own uncontrolled Hulk clones. Throughout the years, Zola's presence was a recurring plague. He worked with Irish extremists. He masqueraded as a professor named Scott Walsh to study radiation levels in human bodies, and he even prompted the formation of the Arnim Zola Defamation League, a group led by the hero Captain Ultra that sought to expose Zola's crimes to the public. But Zola didn't care about his reputation. He cared about the work. He transformed children into mutates, most notably Hallie Takahama, who would eventually escape his clutches to become the hero Jolt. But Zola's most personal and complex gambit began in a place far removed from our reality. Dimension Z in this desolate dimension, where time flows faster than on Earth, Zola built an empire. He ruled from a massive cityship called Zolandia, conducting heinous experiments on the native Frocks and genetically engineering his own children, Jet Black and Leopold. When Captain America was pulled into this realm, Zola saw an opportunity for a final, poetic victory. He surgically implanted an electronic version of his own consciousness into Steve Rogers' chest, a virus that would slowly take over Cap's mind. In a moment of desperation, Cap escaped the fortress, taking Zola's infant son with him. For 12 years, Steve Rogers raised the boy, naming him Ian. In the harsh wilds of Dimension Z, he became a father to Zola's son, teaching him the values of freedom and justice that Zola had tried to erase from the world. But the Bio-Fanatic is a patient man. He sent his daughter, Jet Black, to hunt them down. The ensuing conflict was a Shakespearean tragedy of biological proportions. Zola brainwashed Ian, turning the boy against his adopted father. He prepared his cityship to invade Earth, ready to spread his genetic virus across the globe. But Zola's own creations proved to be his undoing. Jet Black, moved by Cap's nobility, betrayed her father. In the final battle, Sharon Carter sacrificed herself to detonate Zola's station, seemingly ending the threat. But Arnim Zola is a digital ghost. He survived. He returned to Earth, lead an invasion of New York, and eventually joined the High Council of Hydra during the Secret Empire event. He sat at the table as Hydra overthrew the United States government, ruling alongside a version of Steve Rogers whose history had been rewritten by the Cosmic Cube. He even tried to steal the sentient cube, Kabik, from the heart of Wakanda. After the fall of the Hydra regime, Zola found himself in an unfamiliar position, working under duress for a company called Absolution Solutions. He was forced to experiment on superhuman prisoners, his genius shackled by those even more ruthless than himself. It was here that he encountered a reformed Cain Marko, the Juggernaut. In a strange twist of fate, the man who was once an unstoppable force of destruction offered the Bio-Fanatic a choice. He offered Zola a chance to use his power for something other than atrocity, to keep others from being abused the way Zola had been by his captors. Arnim Zola expressed zero interest in reform. He is a man of logic, of genetics, and of a cold, Nazi-born ambition. But the Juggernaut's argument was compelling. For the first time in over a century, the man who replaced his heart with a machine has a choice to make. Will he continue to be the architect of genetic nightmares, or will the Bio-Fanatic find a new purpose in a world that has moved far beyond the madness of his origins?